The short time I've been doing this show, I've come to realize in order to stay true to the vision of America, a democracy for everyone, we are going to need to do it together. Should one side win over the other, we risk becoming something other than a democracy. I fear a winner would insinuate something much darker than the divisiveness we have right now in this country. But to keep the democracy our forefathers outlined for us, we will need to engage each other. This realization came to me after overcoming my own rage against the radical right, a rage that was providing no value to anyone. I also noticed how our politicians diminished any value they might bring to the table by spewing venomous vitriol that they spat across the aisle. They all lost credibility to me when they lost their ability to bring dignity to the discourse, one of our 3 tenets at Radical Metal. Matthew and I are trying to bring the dignity back in this conversation. Matthew is a self-described Anon that follows Q, what the media incorrectly calls Q-Anon. He will explain this later. We could not be more opposite on the political spectrum, but on the human spectrum, I was refreshed to discover how similar we were. We both have 4-year-old daughters that lovingly interrupted us during this conversation. We both are concerned about their future. We're concerned about inflation. And we also share an intense interest in the Bitcoin movement. In fact, we agreed on most of the topics we discuss in what will certainly be part 1 of many discussions. While I'm sure there will be disagreements to come, we both have brought a dignity to the discourse, our testimony to the table, and trust that clarity will come to both of us by this engagement.
We're on with Mr. Matthew Evans. Let me set the stage. We are mutual friends of a wonderful gentleman who I think the world of, and I think you do too, Jerry Welch. Jerry Welch and I met at a Megadeth extravaganza event, VIP type event, and we've been friends ever since. And he was subsequently at my wedding, and we've hung out since too. And he sent us both a text and said, "Hey, you guys should meet and talk about Bitcoin." And then we talked the other day, a conversation I really appreciated, and you shared with me about your interest in Q-Anon. And I just, all these bells went off for me, good bells, in the sense that I'm like, oh, hey, this is a really dignified conversation with someone that I don't really see eye to eye on very much, which is the very essence. It's the very essence of what I'm trying to do with Radical Metal, this show, or it's at the very least the undercurrent of it all. So I really appreciate you coming on to maybe talk about some of the stuff we talked last time, but maybe go into other things. And of course, we will eventually talk about Bitcoin as well, which is, I think we both agree is maybe the great equalizer at the end of the day. But Matthew, let me ask you this. Does this hat make you feel more comfortable?
Megadeth making metal. I love it, man. That's good.
This is the Megadeth version of MAGA. So with that, I think, let me ask you, do you agree, Mr. Evans, do you agree that we will approach this discourse with dignity, that we will bring testimony to the table, and we both agree that we will hopefully get clarity through this engagement?
To be quite honest with you, brother, like that's the easy part. Like, I think that I mean, I can certainly appreciate a disclaimer, at the beginning of something like this, but I think that, even just starting the conversation, the first thing that comes to mind, or my first thought, is going to be, yeah, but most people just don't have the conversation to begin with anymore, right? And look, man, we're all out here trying to put food on our dinner table. We're all trying to freaking keep the lights on in our house. We're all fighting what we're fighting right now. We're a lot more similar than people actually realize. But, at this point in our nation's history, culturally and I think socially, most people fail to launch, if you will. And so like, yeah, I mean, like, I'm sure there's a drunken argument that you and I could have at a bar one night where it's like, man, you're stupid. But at the end of the day, man, it's like we got nothing without each other, right? We've lost sight of that. You're my brother, you're my neighbor. And as a Christian, I think that, for me, it's sad because it actually really shines a light on just like, again, it goes back to my earlier statement, like how easy it is for people to just stop engaging.
You nailed it, man. You nailed it right on the head. What a great beginning this is to try to make the voice a little bit louder of people who are willing to engage one another, despite their differences, and to counterattack, in a way, the vitriol going on and the bar fight. But all you're hearing is from the left and from the right, you're hearing really it's either people making fun of the other side, disparaging the other side, demonizing the other side, and there's very little, I would say. I think there are some voices out there, but there's very little of this, which is talking to one another and trying to I don't know, maybe even come up with, by engaging each other, coming up with superior solutions, if not just coming away with a better understanding of each other. I would love for you to reiterate, I know you talked about it on our call the other day, but your journey here, and I know it's more than just QAnon, so I don't want to put you in just that box. But just your journey with that, with the understanding that, and just for people to know from my background, just in the beginning, and why I came to wanting to have discourse like this. When Trump was saying that the election was stolen, I actually got very enraged by it. And maybe we'll go into that later, but I found myself shaking my fist at the other side. And I just realized it wasn't helping anyone. It wasn't adding value. And I think it's because I just didn't understand it, and maybe still don't understand it, because I saw the futility in that rage, because it was rage, and we can talk more about it later. But the futility of it, understanding that, came to this show, where the clarity comes through engagement. You got to engage. You can't just yell at the other side. But with that, can you share, your journey throughout what's been going on the last few years?
So firstly, it's not QAnon.
Okay.
And I think that if your audience is listening, if there's a Q follower in there, the first thing that Q follower is going to want to hear me say is that there is no such thing as QAnon. There is Q, and then there are Anons.
Okay.
QAnon is the branded version of what the mainstream media has basically, it calls Q as a means of basically marketing it and basically disparaging it. Okay.
Gotcha.
So basically what Q is, or what we believe Q is to be, okay, is we believe that Q is a military operation, okay, that the information that flows to the general public, to people like myself and Anons, is a workaround the mainstream media. Okay, so we all believe that everybody's brainwashed, basically, and I'll be very quick to point this out. Fox viewers just as much as CNN and CNBC or MSNBC. Okay, and I'll go a little bit deeper on that with you too as I kind of walk through this little piece. But Q is basically meant to reach a certain type of audience. Myself, I was late to the game. The hardcore, like, quote unquote conspiracy theorists, right? those people that have been really right for the last couple of years, is basically where like the original sort of audience that Q was trying to reach. Okay. And what Q would do is Q would send out bits of information in what would be called a drop. Okay. And then Anons would go out and research this information. And then you would have these people who compile information. And in essence, what it would do is it would get people a raw version of information of what's really happening. Okay. So the beauty of it was that, you have this army of, and again, any serious Q followers that hear this, there's this army of keyboard warriors out there, okay, who will go and seek out raw information so that we can actually try to find out what's really truly happening.
Just to make sure I heard you right, the mainstream media in your eyes is no longer trustworthy or reliable, and there's certainly, I'm not sure we disagree there at all. I'm sure that the mainstream media is influenced by levels of power that we may not be hobnobbing with. And I certainly, I think there's been egregious, at least from my perspective, there's been egregious violations of an institution of journalism, of egregious violations of trust. But I think from my perspective, what I'm hearing, if I watch CNN, I still do watch CNN. Some of it I'm like, oh, come on. Like, come on, guys. And it's almost laughable. But I feel, and I might be wrong, or I might be brainwashed, but I feel I'm able to distill what's real and what's not coming through them. And it's sort of like the dumbed down version of, whatever the highlights of the news is. And that's kind of where I guess I still get some value from it. But I think you told me the other day you used to watch CNN, and then as your eyes opened to some of these ideas, they became uncredible. But then Fox News became discredited as well after the Arizona calling of Arizona for Biden, the early calling for Biden. Is that accurate?
I'll just give the Reader's Digest version of that story. And I mean, I'll refer to, my own awakening, just lovingly, by the way. And so in essence, that's where I got my news, right? Quote unquote, my news. I trusted I trusted everything I was being told. And as I mentioned to you, I remember when Trump came down that escalator, and I remember how they loved him on CNN and MSN, and is it MSNBC or CNBC? MSNBC, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the two major players. I loved him every day. He's as much in the news as he was. He was as much in the news back then as he is today. Only they loved him. Mm-hmm. And I was not sold on him at all. In fact, I actually really liked Ben Carson. I was like, man, this guy's smooth. He also kind of sort of checks a certain box that, the Republicans have never been able to sort of, cross that Rubicon, if you will. And I loved him. I thought Ben Carson was great. And I loved his story. Amazing story. Just awesome. And then I watched the primary debates, which were a freaking circus, right? And I just didn't like Trump. I didn't like him at all. He's the blowhard. It's loud. It's just the guy's. Who is this guy? Right? And so, sure enough, he crushes into the primaries, and the day that he wins the primary vote, they flipped on him. Both stations at the same time. And it's like, wait a minute. but they loved him yesterday. They literally loved him yesterday. Now they don't like him. They don't like him at all. So immediately, like, I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, how can they, well, today you would say they just changed the narrative, right? They flipped the narrative on him immediately as soon as that happened. So
this was before that. You're saying that it was before the Arizona call.
Long before. This is 2016.
So I'm curious where I don't remember Fox flipping. I thought where Fox lost all its viewers the first time was the Arizona call because of kind of the same things you're saying.
Right.
I didn't realize because I feel like he's to this day he's got very strong advocates on Fox.
Okay, so what's interesting about Fox and so let me just finish where I was going with that.
Sure.
That's what drove me to Fox. That's when I was like, dude, I looked at Fox like that's what old people watch, and like I was not a staunch conservative. I'm still not a staunch conservative.
Mm-hmm.
But what I knew of Fox was, that was back when Bill O'Reilly was still on. Like, it was more the original Fox when I got there. Okay. I got there and I'm like, oh, I love him over here again. This is okay. Maybe I found my people. Maybe I'm a conservative. Like, I mean, and so basically I would go over there because like, I can't handle like the negative energy. Like, it's not like, I don't want to go there just to hear people telling me how terrible somebody is. I want the news. I want the guts. Don't tell me how you feel. Give me a chance to make up my mind and tell me, so I can tell myself how I feel.
Just to clarify, you're speaking of CNN in that?
That's correct. Well, CNN and MSNBC. Yeah.
So you would say Fox was not doing that?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, but I wasn't watching them while they were shredding Obama. I mean, like, yeah. I wasn't. Look, I mean, I'm not saying they weren't shredding Obama for the 8 years that he was in office. Yeah. I mean, I mentioned to you, I voted for Obama. Like, yeah. So all of the shenanigans that they're doing over there, which is how they basically get their own ratings, which is to say, well, now we're on the other side, we're the opposition. So now we have our narrative, and that guy's terrible. And let's talk about all the terrible things about that guy, right? Like that, they tell us that we're polarized. They've polarized us.
Yeah. Oh, well, hey, I don't think you'll get any argument there. If we cut to the chase, I almost feel like there's not even two parties there's one party, the business, the corporate party, right?
Right.
And I think there's a lot, I have a lot of intuition that has informed my suspicion of, the fighting is to keep us distracted. And so that the corporate can continue to get what they need out of government to make the money and keep the disparity between them and the populace.
So this is where I think that our conversation will get really interesting, which is to say that I very, unabashedly talk about my own awakening, right? Mm-hmm. And to some degree, us just starting a conversation could lead to an awakening in a sense for you, right? And I'm not saying you need to wake up. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you may hear something that resonates with you in this conversation that leads you to say, I'm going to go look into that myself.
Yeah.
And then you go find out some information about something that you didn't know, and neither side's telling you.
Well, can we agree on this or make a commitment to each other that I'll come with an open heart and open mind without agenda, and we'll absolutely listen. And if you say something that compels me, I'll let you know, and I absolutely will do that. I hope that you would do the same too. if there's something that might enlighten you by something I say. Not saying I'm an enlightening guy, but that you would come with the same heart, open heart, same flexibility, same open mind.
Well, I absolutely will, but full transparency, like I voted for Obama in 08.
Mm-hmm.
I moved back over to the right, and I don't believe Trump's a Republican.
Okay? I agree with that too.
So I believe he's a populist, and I believe that he's a fighter for the people. So I'm not going to fight you over red and blue.
Mm-hmm.
Because, that's not who I am. That's not who I believe that it's my calling to be.
Yeah.
I believe that my calling is to say, have you ever thought about this? Or have you watched this particular documentary? Would you be open to basically, I'll give you one example. And this will be, and again, and just take it for what it's worth.
Sure.
There's a documentary called Out of the Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I start by bringing this into the conversation because when I watched it, it was extremely illuminating for me as part of my own awakening.
Gotcha.
And what it talks about, now I'm going to tell you this real quick too. The third or the fourth quarter of this documentary goes into Pizzagate. Okay.
What?
So goes into Pizzagate.
Oh,
okay?
Pizzagate. Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. Now, knowing what I know about you, turn that part off. If you believe that that's a conspiracy theory, then it doesn't matter, right? I'm not trying to convince you that part's actually what I want you to be open to in this particular instance. What this documentary talks about the way that newscasts actually brainwash the mass public, the public in mass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It talks about, they give an example at the beginning of it, and I'll just give you like again, just a brief sort of description. It was produced by a guy who used to be a stunt guy in Hollywood, and he started noticing weird-ish in Hollywood. Okay. And it goes into basically there's a thing called MK Ultra, write that one down. Okay. That was again, still a conspiracy, that the CIA did brainwashing experiments with psychedelics in the 60s and 70s on just hippies and the general populace. Okay. And what this documentary espouses is that through those experiments, they learned how to brainwash the general public. And they use the example of Bambi. They basically say, what's the first thing that happens in Bambi?
Oh, the fire? I don't remember.
Yeah, you're close, but what happens in the fire?
The mother dies.
Boom. Now, you take a kid who's watching that and you traumatize a child as the first thing you do in that movie. And then what do? Then they offer the solution. And then they walk you through the story, and then they say, but everything's going to be okay. And they structure the newscast in such a way where they hit you, and then they start basically giving the solutions. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the way that some of the things happen in our society, you can even attach this to the way some bills are introduced into Congress. Something happens. Wait, here's your solution. So that's a little bit.
So maybe an example, 9/11. And I don't want to go into 9/11 as a conspiracy yet, unless that's part of the conversation later. But just as an example, I know some people could maybe make the parallel there. This happened, whether a conspiracy or not. Hey, here's the solution. We need to go to war and maybe feed the war machine or something like that.
I mean, another similar example of that would be the attack on Pearl Harbor, where most people understand that we had no reason to get into World War II. However, the generals knew that attack was coming, we actually allowed for that to happen so that we had a reason to get into World War II.
Gotcha. So what is I guess, if I distill what you're saying, I'm not sure I see any disagreement there as far as, because we're still talking about the media, right? The mainstream media.
Right.
And I'm not sure I can think of an example of the media besides, I mean, the media is doom and gloom, right? Everything is like something harsh happened to get the clicks and to get us to tune in. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about with the solution part of it. Where is the media offering any solutions?
Okay, do you remember when COVID started?
Yeah.
Do you remember how they have the death toll on the right-hand side, and they have the ticker, they have the bottom, and literally it looks like an episode of sport, like a sports center, but it's actually the news, and literally they're just bringing more and more people on to tell you that the sky is falling.
So that's maybe a good segue. I don't know, unless you had more to say on this, but because COVID's kind of one of the big ones, right? Where there's a lot of suspicion. And you know, the way I've thought about COVID is, and you may be right. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But you're saying they're putting the death toll. It's almost like you can't keep your eyes off it. And then Big Pharma comes in and offers, hey, we got the solution. There's Operation Warp Speed from Trump. And then Big Pharma maybe gets all this money for a vaccine that at the end of the day may not have been as effective as they were selling it, to put it lightly. And so I guess my perspective on that, at the time, I was quite angry when people didn't get vaccinated. I was one of those guys saying, hey, how dare you not get vaccinated and put my child in danger? I definitely did. I don't know if it's a 180, but came back and said, what the heck? We got to go in and get another one. We got to get another one. And at the end of the day, even if my child is vaxxed or you're vaxxed, you can still give my child COVID. And so that made me quite upset about it. However, the compelling piece to me on the other side of that is that I felt like COVID was a moving target. And then you have fallible humans trying to hit the target, and I give them, I guess, some grace for not hitting the target or being wrong sometimes. And I also would say that there have been examples. I may not be able to conjure them up at the moment, but I know there's been examples where there's been some egregious examples of maybe some misleading. I did think of one. I forget what it's called. You may remember, but when Rand Paul was grilling Fauci about when you're messing with viruses and making them more dangerous.
Gain of function.
What's that?
Gain of function.
Gain of function. That, like, when Fauci was responding to that, he seemed to be trying to weasel his way out of that one. But at the end of the day, I think despite some egregious acts that led to mistrust, I feel for the most part, with most of the experts, they're doing the best they could to hit a moving target. And I did have somewhat faith, even though they failed sometimes. I still felt like there was enough experts and people with the good of the populace in their mind doing the best they could.
I can't fault you for the opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's more like at least half, if not more, of the general public was there 3 years ago. Right? I mean, when I found out about COVID, I looked at my wife and was like, "We're not taking that. We're not touching that vaccine. There's no way we're touching that thing." I mean, I was aware of the fact that this virus outbreak was modeled at a symposium just 3 months before it actually truly hit. So I believe it was, I may not be right on this, but I believe it was a World Economic Forum attached entity that literally modeled what it would look like if a virus happened to get out, and then one got out like 3 months later. I remember something came through my feed that said Bill Gates Wuhan lab, like within the first month and a half of COVID. And I mean, this was part of my I'm done with cable television news experience. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and I do agree that, when everybody was saying, not everybody, I don't think everybody was saying this, but there was definitely a loud voice that to say the virus came out of a Wuhan lab, that was racist. To me, that's absolutely ludicrous to think that. Like, just bananas. Why is that racist? But I think those were some loud voices, but I don't feel like they were all the voices. I feel like it was pretty medium attention, and that's still maybe it was just the people I was listening to. I'm not sure, but that was always a possibility. That it was it could have been the wet market. It seemed to be at first. Later, obviously, it wasn't. But I think the reasonable voices, I guess, that I was listening to, and I'm not sure who they are, but I think some of them were on CNN. Didn't necessarily go to the racist route.
I'm just going to throw something into the conversation, but like, have you seen the movie Contagion?
Yeah. Oh, wait. No, I haven't. I keep meaning to, but I do realize there's.
Are you aware that literally the actual premise of that movie is the exact thing that we were fed in terms of what happened there? Bat in a wet market in China.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotta watch it. But tell me what is your point with that? It's
well,
not
my point with that is that people who live in the world where I live, crazy people like me, okay? I say that very much tongue in cheek. No, I mean, I actually give that actually truly to people so that I can literally say, you can call me crazy, okay? But, that's okay.
I'm not going to do that because I'm part of the radical metal universe.
That's predictive programming. So they literally, and if we are to believe that the same people that own the entire world and run the world don't have their hands in Hollywood to drip these types of stories out to basically make it so that when it actually happens, we gobble it right up. We don't actually connect the dots to the movie that literally was like, that's Contagion. Mm-hmm. Like, it's exactly the same story.
I gotcha. I guess I have a hard time believing that people are smart enough to conspire to get a Hollywood movie out. Now, let me say, I think there is some Hollywood brainwashing going on, but to conspire, I mean, that was what, 2010 Contagion came out, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And that people could conspire to plant the seed 10 years ago. I guess I just don't think people are that smart. And I guess that's a thing that I feel may be a fundamental flaw with some of this belief in all this planning that's done behind the scenes with maybe the World Economic Forum and whatnot. And that maybe make me asleep, but I just don't feel like people are that smart to execute on such grand schemes, I guess.
I think that maybe smart is the wrong word, more like evil.
And maybe evil, but if you're evil, you still have to be smart enough to execute. And I don't think humans are capable of such elaborate conspiracies. Again, I mean, I'm just referring to planting the seed of Contagion, the movie, and then 12 years later,
Well,
or
it's
10 years later.
okay. Or is it that you don't want to believe it?
Well, maybe.
You familiar with cognitive dissonance?
Yeah, I know cognitive dissonance, but I guess I just don't see it. I feel maybe there's a part of me that I don't see, that doesn't want to believe that. I guess I know how smart I am, and maybe I don't think maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit, or think I'm dumb, but I think other people aren't capable of such grand schemes. One thing my brother said recently that I thought was compelling, it kind of consolidated how I feel about things. If we are to stay true to the vision of America, we need each other. We can't, it's basically what you said. I'm just adding in the vision of America part. We need each other. We have, whether we like it or not, we have to do it together and cooperate enough and have conversations like this enough to maintain the vision of America. You know, the left can't do it. The left or the Republicans or whoever can't do it without the 35% populist, maybe MAGA population. They can't. And same with I don't know if this is is this the right terminology? If I call them MAGA, is that accurate? I'm just talking about the 35% of the quote unquote Republican base.
Yeah, I think the Trump's MAGA base, yeah.
And so we can't do it without each other. So we better start talking to each other. And tell me what you think of this. This may be unfair to say. I don't really know, but there seems to be a little bit of an undercurrent of, make America great again. There does feel to be some undertones of back when white people run the country.
Okay.
And so, and maybe that's me getting the wrong information or listening to the wrong people. But I feel like that's kind of an undercurrent, and that they're going so strong to kind of keep it what might have been the status quo with that hierarchy, largely based off race, because I think the stats say by 2048 white people will be the minority. And so there's maybe a panic there. And I'm saying that as a question. I don't know what your thoughts on that are. I really don't know, but he made the point that if those undercurrents are true, and they're the minority, they're going to need the minorities now, or the side they don't like to talk to very much, come that time, or they may be in trouble.
I obviously think it would be remiss to not acknowledge the fact that there is and always will be a racist element to our country. Okay, that'll never go away. I think that it's no matter where you are. I mean, there's a different version of racism in almost every population or culture, right?
Yeah.
I think why Trump resonates with people is that I believe that America does have a culture. You go to Europe and people will tell you we have no culture at all. Like we are this group of misfits and idiots that don't know what the heck we're doing, right? We obviously don't have the best past. Neither do they. And there's no getting away from that, right? You can always point to racist moments in history where America screwed up. Okay. Now I would submit to you that we were doing really darn good until 2008. I voted for President Obama.
Mhm.
I remember that parade when he won. I remember that stadium filled with white people and black people celebrating his win. And I remember how excited I was about the fact that we had a black president. And I mentioned to you in our phone call, it wasn't very long after that all of a sudden I would turn the TV on and I'm being told I'm racist. I'm like, whoa, 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 hold on. I'm racist. Now, vaccines are racist. Everything's racist.
Yeah.
It's a dog whistle at this point, in a sense. It's lost, hit. I think a lot of those people, I bet you if you polled the MAGA society, the MAGA community, I would bet you a lot of those people voted for Obama. I would be willing to make that bet. Now, obviously, I don't have anything empirically that I could point to. But I'd be willing to bet you that a significant amount of those people did. The ideal of America isn't about white people running it. It's about people who would fight and die for that flag because what we have is so special, in my opinion. Okay. However, it's getting harder and harder right now to want to fight for that flag.
I definitely think that the accusations of racism have definitely been flawed a lot. And by every time someone falsely or throws that out there loosely, without accountability, it dilutes.
Yep.
It dilutes the countering what's really true racism.
Right.
It diminishes the power of folks to fight what's really the real racism out there.
And if I may, to that end, quote unquote, white supremacy is also a different version of that, right? The idea that we're losing what we have, like I don't see that. I understand the fact that you can make the argument that people are sad that they might not actually be the majority anymore and things are going to change, right? It's going to be, there's no getting around it. But for every person that isn't naturally born in this country, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't want them to love our country. It's, do you know what I mean? Like if you work all day long so you can send your money back to your family that needs money in Mexico, but not spend it here, then are you contributing to the economy? Now you're helping your family, right? On paper, you came here for more opportunity, only to send the money over there for them to spend it in the Mexican, in that economy, right? So like, is that racist? I mean, or is that smart?
You mean for the immigrant family to send money back home? Is that racist or is that smart? Yeah, or is it? I mean, I think some people might say it's racist to even be critical of that. That's where I think there's a problem. It's like, no, I'm just thinking out loud. I may have a problem with that. I want them to, if they're going to be here, I want them to pay taxes like I do and contribute like I do. And that's where someone would throw. I don't necessarily agree with what I just said per se. I didn't think it's very nuanced, but that's where someone would say, "Oh, you're a racist because you're saying they're sending money home and not spending it here." Well, no, that's not racism. That's just thinking. And just to that point, for some reason, I'm thinking of this is all about the discourse, and I just think the discourse is so important, and why it's so important to have the engagement and talk to each other, is to refine our opinions and steel on steel, or whatever the metaphor is, stone on stone, to refine how we look at these things. But what we shouldn't be doing is, when we're trying to refine how we think on something, sometimes what comes out of the mouth might sound off or weird. And hey, let me think about it. I'm trying to think it through. I'm talking to my friend here and trying to figure it out. So if I say something that's offensive to you, it's probably because I still am thinking about it and trying to understand how I feel about it. I think the big metaphor or the analogy is with comedians, and that's a big free speech arena, the whole comedy world. And it incenses me if folks go to a show and a comedians, how they work stuff out, they tour around clubs and they're working on their bits, and sometimes something comes out because they're just being human, trying to make laughs, and maybe something off-putting will come out, but someone's got a cell phone, and then that guy's canceled.
Yeah.
That's infuriating to me. That's something where I'm like, don't they understand that they're human, and maybe they would have said it differently if they had a minute to think about it? But that's free. I think that's free speech. But and if you drive, and I know now I'm going on a tangent. If you drive people into the shadows because they're too afraid to speak in public, to get their opinion refined by discourse with others, then that person's just going to live in a vacuum and maybe cultivate a real shitty opinion.
Well,
and that's why free speech is so important.
Well, I think we should just be given the opportunity to at least ask the question.
Yeah, great way to end. I think it's great that, I didn't have any expectations. I really didn't. But it is kind of, I guess, refreshing, and I hope it sends a message out there to whoever may watch later that, we're really not very different.
Yep.
Hey, brother, thanks so much. And I'll see you soon. I'll be in touch, and we'll schedule the next one.
Appreciate you, man.
All right, Matthew. See you.
Bye.
Bye.